Have you considered the possibility that everything you believe is wrong? Not merely off a bit, but totally wrong. Nothing like things as they really are. If you've done this, you know how fragile those phantoms we hold in our heads are. Those wisps of thought that people die and kill for, betray lovers for, give up lifelong friendships for. If you've not done this, you probably don't understand this poem or think it's not even a poem, but a bit of opaque nonsense occupying too much of your time. So you probably should stop reading it here and now. Okay. So that's the first half of a poem called 180 Degrees by somebody called Federico Morimarco. And I'll read the second half of the poem if you promise to stay awake for the whole talk. Yeah, so that poem in many ways sums up what the current theme has been about. So the theme, which we're coming near to the end of, is called Radical Reality, or Shocking Buddhist Ideas. And 2 weeks ago, Pamavadra pointed out that the Buddha himself didn't set out to shock or to be radical. He just communicated his direct experience of the way things really are. And it was shocking to people to the extent that they were living a life of greed, hatred, and delusion. So the Buddha said that unenlightened beings have what he called topsy-turvy views. So the Sanskrit word for that is viparyasa, if you can read it. Topsy-turvy views, or upside-down views. Completely upside-down views and perceptions, not just a little bit out of focus, not with one screw slightly loose. And these upside-down views lead to emotions and behaviours that, in the end, just cause us more pain. So he particularly talked about 4 upside-down views, which just about everyone has. So the first one is that we treat ever-changing processes as permanent things. The second one is that we expect lasting satisfaction from things that can't give it. And then the third one is we see a substantial core to things that are insubstantial. And then the fourth one, so you might recognise those 3 are very related to the 3 lectioners. The fourth one is we confuse what is beautiful with what is ugly. So of course, when reality disappoints us, we get upset. We are shocked. A loved one gets ill. A partner changes. The printer breaks down. We're incensed, shocked, horrified. So in a sense, it's not the ideas in themselves that are shocking. If we are shocked, well, it's because we build our lives around these upside-down views. So the talks in this theme so far have been applying this idea to our everyday lives here and now. So we've had the upside-down view of thinking that this world can be fixed. We've had the upside-down view of always seeing suffering as a bad thing. Another one, thinking that happiness comes from outside. Everything can be understood rationally. So those are some of the things that we've been looking at. And today you can have another one. So I've got several titles for today's talk. I couldn't quite come to the right one. Anyway, so today's shocking Buddhist idea is feelings are not as important as we think they are. Or don't take your feelings so seriously. Or don't listen to your feelings so much. So in that area. Actually, this is quite a humbling talk for me to be giving, because over the last 2 or 3 months, my life's been really dominated by strong feelings. And it's part of the reason why I chose to do the talk, because I thought it would be good to think about it. But it's been quite strange, experiencing really strong anxiety mostly, as well as thinking about the talk, about not taking your feelings so seriously. It's been quite a challenge. About 5 years ago, I I started a relationship with a guy in India, and it was my first serious relationship, so I was very serious about it. And there was all sorts of drama, the pain of separation, jealousy, all sorts of stuff, all sorts of dramas. And I remember talking to my preceptor, Padmavajra, about it, and he listened patiently for some time, several days actually. And then when he thought the time was right, he said, "Well, it's a good job they're only feelings, isn't it?" What? Only feelings? Doesn't he know how precious these feelings are to me? My precious feelings. He didn't pursue it, funnily enough. I didn't say anything, but he probably sensed the reactivity. He didn't say anything similar for several years, actually. So that's an example of someone who was really taking their feelings very seriously and was not receptive to an alternative view. So what do we mean by feelings? So I've used this word feelings. So in Buddhism it has a very specific meaning. So in English we tend to use the words feeling and emotion interchangeably. They pretty much mean the same thing to us. But in Buddhism they have quite different meanings. So feeling is a translation of the word Vedana. Vedana. Bring my notes. So as we saw when we looked at the wheel of life, we come into contact with the world in various ways through our 5 physical senses and our mind. And the world makes an impression on us. It triggers some response. It triggers some sensation. It makes us feel something. And that feeling can have a pleasant tinge. It can have a painful tinge. Most of the time, I think it barely registers. But, so that's what we mean by feeling in Buddhism. It's the initial feeling response to coming into contact with the world around us. So these painful or pleasant feelings, they're conditioned by the past. Okay? They're the result of past choices, past experiences, past interpretations we've made, past conditions. But the past has gone. Okay? The past is no longer in our control. So these feelings are just popping up all the time, conditioned from the past, coming out of the past. They're a guaranteed and unavoidable fact of life. So, you're just going to get them. You're going to get unpleasant feelings, you're going to get pleasant feelings. Nerves before a talk, today. Headache, parking tickets, hostile stare across the street, all the time. The world is making impressions on us. Pleasant impressions too, an attractive man or woman. A wonderful piece of music, the smell of chips. So the world is making impressions on us all the time, and our immediate feeling response just arises spontaneously, but conditioned by our past. Then out of these directly experienced feelings, we tend to create complex emotional reactions. Okay? That is a choice. Okay, so that's the main difference between feelings and emotions in Buddhism. So we give those initial feelings, we give them energy. We select memories, we add stories, we add interpretations. We start to crave more of what it is that is pleasant to us, push away what it is that's painful to us. So what starts out as a very simple feeling response can quite quickly grow and harden into a complex emotional reaction because of choices we make, actually. And that reaction is what causes us extra suffering. So you may have heard the teaching of the second arrow, but it does involve the first arrow. So that initial feeling, assuming it's an unpleasant one, is known as the first arrow. But then the drama we make out of it, that sort of emotional reaction to the feeling, is a second arrow, and that's one that we've inflicted on ourselves. And then it can be a third arrow and a fourth arrow. By reacting in that way, we are creating the future. Okay? We are creating future consequences. We're creating karma. So somebody looks at you in a certain way, you know that way in a meeting particularly, somebody looks at you in a certain way that presses your button. And immediately an unpleasant Vedana arises. But then maybe you start to fuel it, okay, in your mind with memories and stories. They looked at me like that in the last meeting too. Maybe the next time you speak to them, you're just a bit harsh, you're a bit snappy. And then that leaves a bad taste in your mouth. That bad taste in your mouth is the second arrow. And then you blame that bad taste on them. And then you feel really indignant and wounded by them. And you can see how it sort of grows out of proportion. And it all started with a little glance in your direction across the table. And now you've got this big, complicated emotional mess that's dominating your experience and causing you real difficulties. Sigh. So that's the difference between feelings and emotions in Buddhism. But what feelings and emotions have in common is that they're not ultimately real. Hey! They're not things, but processes. So on many occasions, the Buddha had a dialogue with his followers in this area. So it would go something like this. I've sort of paraphrased. So the first question would be, do you have any control over your feelings and emotions? Can you will yourself to feel a certain way? Wouldn't that be great? Wake up in the morning, it's like, happiness! And then the answer, of course, is always no. They just arise. They're just arising all the time. And then the second question would be, are your feelings and emotions permanent? The answer, no. They just come and go. And then another question, so can your feelings and emotions give you the basis of real satisfaction? No, they are unreliable. So given that feelings and emotions are outside your control, are continually changing, and therefore ultimately unsatisfying, is it appropriate to identify with them as yourself? No, Lord, that would be foolish. So then you go on, something like this. So what is an ever-changing conditioned process can't be said to be a fixed, substantial, separate self. So stop identifying with them so much. Stop taking them so seriously. Stop holding onto them so tightly. Feelings are just like froth on the surface of water. In fact, you should see that feelings are feeble and comfortless. So you should become disillusioned with them. Become less influenced by them. Stop seeing them as a reliable basis for your life. If we can do that, the Buddha says, that is the way to real freedom. It's pretty strong stuff. It's very fashionable these days to really give a lot of attention to our feelings. So the standard greeting when you see someone is, how are you? Which really means, how are you feeling? As if the most important aspect of a person's experience is always what they're feeling. I'm trying to think, what can I say instead? So I'll say something like, what have you been up to? How's your practice? But no, it's like, how are you? How are your feelings? And then there's this, in today's world, there's this buzzword, authenticity. And it tends to be seen as being true to your feelings. Okay? This is how I really feel. So I have to express that fully, otherwise I'm being inauthentic, aren't I? Well, the Buddha was quite clear about it. There is nothing essentially real about feelings, and we can choose not to express them. So there's an order member called Alaka who came out with a legendary saying related to this game. Is that a game? A fairground game where a ferret is sent underground, and then there's a series of tunnels, and then people place a bet, I think, on which hole he's going to come out of. And Alaka said, feelings are like ferrets. It's very entertaining to see which hole they're going to come out of, but they're not much to base your life on. So what you're saying is that positive and negative Vedana, positive and negative feelings aren't a reliable guide to whether things will benefit us or not. If we try to use them as a guide, we're usually disappointed. So yeah, we wake up in the morning, there's morning meditation in 5 minutes. Don't really feel like that, negative Vedana. Duvet is really nice, positive Vedana. Stay in bed. And then later in the day, it's like, oh God, I wish I'd meditated this morning. Or eating too much chocolate. Spending loads of money on a gadget we don't really need to make us feel better. Hiding away when we're feeling anxious. All ways that we sort of allow our Vedana to sort of push us in a certain direction and then later somehow regret. For the Buddha, authenticity means something very different. To be authentic means to live your life in accordance with higher ethical values and higher truths. To be true to your values, to be true to the Dharma, not to base your life on mere feelings. So yeah, the Buddha saying, don't take your feelings so seriously. So yes, I'm aware that I feel irritated and stingy, but I don't need to listen to that or express that. So I'm going to try to be kind and generous. I'm going to feel the laziness and make an effort anyway. This comes up in the Metabhavana, so particularly in the 4th stage. So very often, unpleasant Vedana comes up in the 4th stage, a dislike of someone, an irritation towards someone. And we can be aware of that, be aware of the dislike, be aware of the irritation, be aware of the ill will, and still send them metta, still wish them well. So that may not seem like we're being true to our feelings. That may not seem authentic. But we are being true to our ethical values. We're being true to metta. And that, in Buddhism, is true authenticity. Yeah, and very often our feelings are the basis of likes and dislikes. So imagine someone you work with who has a really annoying voice or laugh, which grates every time you hear it. It gives you an unpleasant Vedana. So you start to feel really irritated whenever they're around. And maybe you just keep out of the way and don't get to know them. And maybe you start to fill in the gaps with stories of your own. And before you know it, you really dislike this person. Even the sound of her voice makes my skin crawl. So our emotions and stories have this habit of gathering energy and momentum. But it all started with this simple initial feeling response, this Vedana, a phantom, a wisp. I read another story recently about, it was 2 order members who kept falling out with each other. And they're just forever in conflict. They just couldn't get on together. And someone was quite concerned about it and went to Sangharakshita. And Sangharakshita's response was, they don't have to like each other. They just have to work together. What's liking anyway? It's not even an emotion. Liking is irrelevant. How they feel about each other is irrelevant. Okay, another area related to this is about acceptance. So another buzzword is acceptance. So in modern therapies, in psychotherapy, there's often this process of getting in touch with your feelings, bringing feelings which are outside of your awareness into your awareness, bringing them up to the surface, a process of self-acceptance. And that's a very helpful process. But Buddhism goes much further than that. So in Buddhism, the whole purpose of developing awareness of your feelings and emotions is to give us the ability to see them for what they are and to choose not to put our energy behind them. So I sort of had this experience before I came to the Buddhist Centre many years ago. I was in therapy for 1 year. I found it really, really helpful. It did help me to understand myself better. And in a way that helped me to accept myself more. But I realised that just understanding myself didn't actually solve things. It was sort of quite interesting. But actually what I needed to do was, in a way, get over myself. I knew that I needed to take responsibility for myself, to take responsibility for my actions, and I knew that I needed a path to help me to do that. So in a way, coming to the Buddhist Centre followed on very nicely from therapy for me. So this buzzword of acceptance, so we're advised to accept our feelings. I looked up the definition of accept, and it means to receive with approval. To receive with approval. So yeah, accepting our feelings, receiving our feelings with approval, welcoming our feelings in. I'm actually reading a book at the moment, and in that book there's a definition of mindfulness, which is, mindfulness is complete acceptance of your feelings and thoughts without any judgment whatsoever. Well, that isn't what the Buddha taught. Okay? That isn't the Buddha's take on mindfulness. So before the Buddha was enlightened, he describes a period before he was enlightened. And this is what he says. He said, so he was sitting in meditation, and in meditation, Vedana were arising, thoughts were arising. Suppose that I divide my thoughts and emotions into two classes, wholesome and unwholesome. So then I set on one side wholesome thoughts expressing simplicity, love and compassion. On the other side I set unwholesome thoughts expressing craving, ill will and cruelty, since I could see that they were not conducive to my well-being. I considered, this unwholesome thought has arisen in me. It leads to suffering for myself. It leads to suffering for others. It obstructs wisdom. It causes difficulties. And when I considered like this, they subsided. So whenever such an emotion arose in me, I abandoned it, removed it, did away with it. Doesn't sound much like complete acceptance without judgment. We need to use our judgment, we need to use our discriminating mind to make choices about which emotions we want to put our energy behind. Yes, accept that the feeling is there, but no, don't accept its essential validity, its inalienable right to be there. Not all emotions are to be welcomed. Not all emotions are to be approved of, accepted, accommodated. I don't accept hatred. I don't accept stinginess. So, and again, in relation to my partner and I, in our early days, a big difficult emotion that I struggled with was jealousy. Okay, so I was a million miles away from him, and then I'd hear him talk about this girl that he met, or this person that he was attracted to, and it was like, whoa! Jealousy, really, really unpleasant actually. And it went on for a while, and then I just realised that it was causing myself suffering because I was just ruminating about it all the time. I was hurting him, and I was developing hatred for someone I'd never met. It was really strange. So I just really determined to do away with that jealousy. I disapproved of it. I rejected it. Removing jealousy for me in that situation was the best thing that I could do to be kind to myself. We talk about being kind to ourselves as if that's somehow always wrapping ourselves in a fluffy duvet or something. But sometimes being kind to ourselves is actually doing what we can to remove difficult emotions. It's not being harsh at all. It's real metta for myself, for my partner, and whoever it was that I was jealous of. Sangharakshita is one of his provocative moments, came out with the slogan, "Don't accept yourself." And it was a deliberate sort of challenge to this sort of buzzword of accept everything. And he said, "Don't accept yourself. This may seem like blasphemy to you." And then he said, "Total acceptance is suitable for infants, but not for grown adults. Yes, we welcome and accept what is skillful, and we reject what is unskillful. Without that attitude, there can be no spiritual development." So yeah, it might seem blasphemous to say, don't accept yourself. But that, in a way, that is what the Buddha taught. Don't totally accept every aspect of your experience. So that all seems very straightforward, doesn't it? But of course it's not, because this whole area of feelings and emotions is very swampy territory. Strong feelings do arise, and before we know it, they become whirlwinds of thought, volcanoes of emotion. Sometimes we can feel just assailed by very strong emotions, and they are difficult to work with. In a way, it's a lifetime's spiritual quest to get to the bottom of all this stuff. I was with Pamavajra again recently, and again I was talking about my difficult emotions, a different set of difficult emotions this time. And I thought I'd be clever, I'd outwit him, and I said, but they're only feelings, it's okay. And then he said, oh, but they are important. Skillful means, I think. What he meant by that was it was good for me to bring them into awareness, to discuss them, to be open about them, to see them for what they are. Because it's far better actually to be aware of our feelings than to repress them. So repressed feelings can cause a lot of havoc in the world. There's a lot of energy in feelings, and we need to be able to harness that energy. We need to know what we feel if we're to direct that energy in a positive direction. But at the same time, on the other side, we don't need to give full rein to those feelings. We don't have to over-identify with those feelings, hold them tightly, take them seriously. So this is the challenge, to find a way of developing awareness of our sort of bare feelings without taking hold of them and creating these painful, messy, complicated emotional reactions. And luckily for us, we know that there is a gap in which we can do such a thing. So, you've all come across the gap. It is there between the gap between our immediate feeling responses and our reactions of craving and aversion, of grabbing and pushing away. So staying in that gap as much as possible is the way off the painful habitual cycles we get into. And while we're in that gap, we have a chance to get a more accurate perspective of what's going on, to see Vedana as Vedana, to see it for what it is, as impermanent, insubstantial, unreliable. And sometimes we get it right, and sometimes we don't. So I think in this area, self-forgiveness is very important, because it's a very difficult area, and we try, and sometimes we fail. But if we don't get it right and we realise we haven't got it right, then that's a really positive thing. So I mentioned earlier that the last 2 or 3 months I've been struggling a lot with very acute anxiety. The triggers for this were largely out of my control. So they were conditions outside of my control or things from the past. And at times I just felt completely overwhelmed by them. And floored by my reactions. And mostly the reactions weren't thoughts. They were, it was in my body. It was just this sort of anxiety which was running right through my body and coming in tidal waves. Really, really unpleasant. I almost felt like I was under attack. I think I said to someone, it feels like I'm possessed, actually. And when I was in those states, it was all I could do just somehow to get through the day. And when I was in that state, it was sort of difficult to imagine that anxiety would go away, that it wouldn't be there forever. So completely out of proportion. It's very mysterious to me. And all I could think was there's things at play here which I don't understand and which I don't have much control of. But I'll just try and sweat them out. But then I reached a point where I got really fed up with it, really, really tired of it. And something else kicked in. So I sort of gave part of myself, gave the other part of myself a talking to. And it went something like this: I can't live my life like this, just a submissive slave to anxiety, believing in it, whatever the cost to my dignity, to my self-respect, to my well-being. I have to do something about it. Somehow I have to bring this into contact with the Dharma. So in that conversation, in a way, I'd found my way back to the gap, the precious gap. Okay, yesterday I was defeated, and okay, today I feel absolutely terrible, but tomorrow is another day, and I can create a different tomorrow. Tomorrow I can do something different. Tomorrow I can do whatever it takes to break me out of this. So I think when difficult emotions are really sort of deeply embedded and a bit mysterious to us, it needs a bit of warrior energy to shift it. The gently, being kind to myself. Gently, there doesn't always do it. Sometimes being kind to yourself is about applying a certain amount of force to a situation. So what I did was I took initiative and I wrote a plan of action. So I planned out the whole of the following day what I was going to do, what steps I was going to take, rather than just wake up anxious and drift through the day getting worse. And I pretty much followed the plan. So I got up and meditated, which I hadn't been doing. And in meditation, I stayed with the Vedana. I stayed with the sensations in my body of anxiety. Then I got up and threw up. That wasn't on the plan. And thought, okay, keep going, why not? So then I went for a run, that was more helpful. So it's just something about getting my energy moving. Then I chose to go into the community lounge and have breakfast with guys in the community, which I was avoiding doing because of my anxiety. I was sort of keeping myself separate. I remember saying to, I think it was Savanagama, I remember saying to Savanagama, I was struggling today. And we had to talk about it, but it was just saying it to someone. Then I think I went in the garden and did some digging with Surumati and some volunteers. And then I spent an afternoon finding whatever way I could to be kind to people. So I visited my sister in hospital. I swept the kitchen floor to make Pete happy. Pete likes a nice, clean kitchen floor. Mogavamsa was coming back from retreat, buying some flowers, But in a way, it was sort of... I knew that if I did that, that would make me feel better because it would take me out of myself. So things like that. I think at a certain point during the day, I got involved in some mad rugby scrum in the kitchen with the boys. A bit of play is good, isn't it? So basically, rather than, on that particular day, rather than allowing my feelings to be my compass for the day, I chose ethics. In effect, that's what I was doing. Spending time with good friends, talking openly, honestly, trying to reach out to others with small acts of kindness and generosity. So I was trying to make use of the Buddhist toolkit, what we all learn on introductory courses. And it worked. In a very real sense, I became a different person. I was a different person at the end of the day compared to what I was at the beginning of the day. The feelings were different, the emotions were different, I was different. And of course that gave me more confidence in the toolkit. So when anxiety has come up again, and it has, I've been quicker to use it. I've been it's like, okay, I know what to do now in this situation. So yeah, the last 2 or 3 months, it's been a bumpy journey, and through it I'm learning to hold the emotions less tightly, to be less dominated by them, and to take them less seriously. Through the choices that I made on that particular day, in a way I was building a foundation for a different future. So that's an example of how I've worked with adversity. But adversity presents us with a real opportunity to grow in this way, to become more flexible, more resilient. Little quote I came across which I liked. "Blessed are the flexible, for they shall never be bent out of shape." And there's another one, similar one, by Charles Darwin. So talking about his theory of evolution, he says, "It's not the physically strongest who survive, it's not the most intelligent who survive, it's those who are most adaptive to change," which I thought was fascinating, actually. Because we think survival of the fittest, we immediately think the strongest, but actually the fittest are those who are most flexible. Very interesting. So, in those periods of adversity, they're real opportunities because we have the chance to experience painful Vedana, but at the same time make skillful choices. And many times we'll miss the boat. But that point when we are feeling unpleasant feelings but still make a skillful choice, that can be a real breakthrough actually. We develop the flexibility to rise above the feelings, to rise above the Vedana, and choose to act skillfully to create a positive future. It's a really key skill to learn, probably the central skill of the spiritual life. And it's in the difficult times when we really have the best chance to learn how to do it. So that's why Buddhist tradition through the ages tells us that not just to bear adversity, not just to tolerate adversity, but to relish it, to see it as an opportunity. Another little quote, this one's for Tansel. "I'm not afraid of the storms, for I am learning to sail my boat." That's by Louisa May Alcott. "I'm not afraid of the storms because I'm learning to sail my boat." So it's a difficult skill to learn, this whole area of working with strong emotion. But it's really a worthwhile one. It's one which could prevent a lot of harm to ourselves and others, and it's one which can create a lot of merit in the world. So that is today's shocking Buddhist ideas, in fact. So feelings and emotion aren't as important as we think. Feelings and emotions are not a reliable basis for our lives. Don't accept feelings and emotions without judgment. And dare to take your feelings a little less seriously. I promise you the end of the poem, so I'll carry on from where I left off. If you have arrived at this point, still awake, maybe, just maybe, you are open to that possibility, the possibility of being absolutely, completely wrong about everything that matters. How different the world seems then. Everyone who was your enemy is your friend. Everything you hated, you now love. And everything you love slips through your fingers like sand.